Welcome to Rooted in Retirement with Zach Gray. Zach is the founder of Rooted Wealth Advisors and is one of the nation's leading financial advisors, helping people answer some of retirement's biggest questions, covering topics like income, taxes, and Social Security.
So this is a place where we have to be really concerned about how much of this money am I going to keep.
Zach is here to make sure you can enjoy the retirement you deserve. This is Rooted in Retirement with Zach Gray.
It's a saying we're all familiar with. The only thing that stays the same is change. So how can you keep life's curveballs from derailing your retirement? That's our topic today. Welcome to Rooted in Retirement. I'm Kelly Dame. Today joining me, Zach Gray, founder of Rooted Wealth Advisors. Zach, as always, so fantastic to be with you today.
Thank you, Kelly. It's so great to be back.
So we're talking about a big topic here, trying to plan for a 20 to 30 year retirement. It sounds tough on its own, right? And then when you think about all of the different scenarios that can come into play, for some, it can be downright impossible.
Wow, way to start things off at a low point.
Well, bring us up here.
I guess, it does feel a little overwhelming when you put it that way. But I often think back to this quote that I used to have on my wall, and the question was, how do you eat an elephant? Kelly, do you have any idea?
I've never eaten one before.
Neither have I.
Doesn't sound appeasing, but I would imagine it takes a long time.
It's going to take a while, and you just have to go, one bite at a time, and so you have to take some manageable steps, and sometimes the first step is just the toughest. It's hard to get started. And sometimes I think that's the apprehension that folks have to planning. It is a bit the approach that we take at Rooted to planning, is making sure to break things down into manageable pieces and to, once again, get some momentum, start to build that plan so that we have something put together that should last 20, 30 plus years, because that, once again, is how long retirements are lasting these days.
So we can be a little bit more positive, right? Instead of being the downer, but also just trying to bring in a dose of reality here as well as the situation. So you talked about plan, which is obviously very important. So can you help explain what your approach, your elephant plan is, so to speak?
Well, I think that there's really 5 core areas, and this isn't just our opinion. This is really the CFP standard, and really what it's built around as we start to think about the core areas that need attention as we're going to put a plan together. In our office, we call it PLANT. We try to run with this rooted theme, if you will, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And so if you break that down into those 5 letters, you think of the P as a prosperous investment plan, making sure that we're growing our investments. Of course, we need to be mindful of fees. We need to make sure that we're looking at portfolio structure. And really alongside that is to make sure that we have the lasting income, hence the L, because, retirement without income, Kelly, it's just not that great, right? So many times we're looking to get some of our income from those prosperous investments, and thus it makes a lot of sense to make sure that we're looking at those paired together. The next would be advanced tax strategy. And so we really talk a lot in our office about the idea of making sure to keep as much of your hard-earned money in your purse or in your wallet to spend. And really those 3 components go together quite nicely. Once again, thinking about our investments, well, how much of that are we actually going to keep due to the taxation? Because we sure want to make sure we have that income to make sure we can last throughout this 10, 20, 30 plus year retirement timeline. As we start to think through the last 2, the N we refer to is nurtured healthcare. So making sure to approach things like long-term care, for example. Healthcare happens to be one of the top costs we're going to have in retirement, probably only second to the tax bills that we're going to have to pay, and we've already addressed that a little bit. T, I have to be thinking about a timeless legacy. Making sure that we're living life on our terms, making sure that we have an estate plan in place, because we don't want to have that bickering, amongst maybe our kids or the next generation. Let's try to put something in place so that once again, we have a really well-built plan that can last decades.
I love this analogy so much of plant because you think about you want it to grow, right? Your retirement. Also, it requires watering. So you can't just have a plant and let it go. You've got to nurture it. And by the way, that requirement may change from season to season. So let's talk about, as we're navigating these changes through the course of a 20 or 30-year retirement, how do you help people water that plant and prepare for this big time span?
Yeah, well, I think the first step is just really digging in, okay? And actually is one of the segments that we have coming up later in the show. But as you start to think about that and dig into some of those concerns, those changes that might, maybe cause us to have to adjust along the way, let's think about maybe some family circumstances. As I think about when I got married to my beautiful wife, Jenna, that changed things, right? As we start to think about... For the better, most definitely, that is correct. Thinking about the birth of our children, right? So kids definitely change things. I'm assuming it had to for you and your husband as well. On the flip side of that coin, what happens if someone passes away? That is definitely something that can be of concern. We have to make some changes. And even thinking through things like divorce, sadly that happens half the time. So good or bad, these things can happen. And these are good points for us to think about what we're doing, how we're putting things together, because they change things like tax filing status, legacy goals, who we're planning for. And even thinking through your personal health is one thing as well. How do things look? Of course, we've heard so many stories over time of maybe it's friends or family members, something pops up. So we want to make sure that we're being optimistic. And we also need to make sure, though, that we're planning for some of the worst.
Important insight, Zach. Thank you so much. Now, if you would like to chat through your personal plan for growing a prosperous retirement, contact Zach and the team at Rooted Wealth Advisors. There's no cost or obligation. Call or text 855-955-6868. Again, that number is 855-955-6868. Well, it's one thing to try to plan around your own personal circumstances, but geopolitical conflict and policy changes overseas and here at home can also impact your future. Zach helps you navigate those changes coming up next. Rooted in Retirement continues right after this.
Social Security. You've been paying into the system your whole career. Now it's time to get the most out of it. But with so many choices, what's the best strategy for you? And how can you maximize your benefits? Find out in this no-obligation Social Security report. Learn how your Social Security benefits can play a role in your overall retirement income plan. A lot of factors go into optimizing your benefits, and if you make an informed decision, you could end up with tens of thousands of extra dollars in retirement. You only get one chance to make the best decision for you. Take the first step and download the Social Security report today.
I'm back now with Zach Gray, and today we're discussing how planning can help you stay on track when life throws you a curveball. So Zach, it's one thing to plan around our own personal circumstances or our family situation, but let's talk about what happens when things come in, and they will, that are out of our control.
Well, there is a lot of things that are out of our control. And so when we think about recently, inflation, cost of living, it's definitely gotten higher. At least it feels that way for me. I was just telling this story over lunch the other day, and we went to the local grocery store. I got the necessities. I didn't get anything extra, Kelly, just nothing extra. And she rings it up and it's like $640. And I thought to myself, sadly, I think that's only going to last like a week or 10 days. These kids of ours are just devouring food, which is great. Eating healthy food, it's a little more costly too. But the point is, boy, it's costly, right? And it's not just that, it's the prices of nearly everything that we feel. So we have to make sure that our retirement is going to reflect those changes as well in a positive way. We have to make sure we can get the income that we need. But that cost of living, it's out of our control. State of the economy, that's a bit out of our control. We can't necessarily control when the markets are going to go up or going to go down. We can't predict it. I think that we can make sure to build a well-diversified portfolio, but we need to make sure that we're looking at, prosperous times, protecting for maybe times that aren't so great as well. And that includes things that would be even geopolitical, overseas. All of a sudden, even if it doesn't include the U.S., it can definitely have an impact here on the markets. And Also thinking about tax policy. They're not asking us necessarily, what we want to do about it. But what I would say is that we have to build around the rules that we have. Taxes are much lower now than they have been in the past. You and I have talked on different shows about, different systems that we have in place that have, really moved the needle for folks and kept more of their hard-earned money. I think it's really important that we take a look at some of the steps that we can take right now. Those things are critically important. Though out of our control, all three of these that I just brought up, they are things that we need to make sure we're looking at, we're addressing, and that we're building around.
But it's a balancing act, right? So you think about trying to keep up to pace with inflation. Also, do I want to have too much risk, not enough risk, right? Like, how do you help people find that right balance amidst all of these different variables?
Well, everyone's different. There's no cookie cutter plan, at least at Rooted Wealth Advisors, there's not. We have to look at each individual situation. Everything is unique as we look at that. We obviously need to make sure that things are well diversified. We don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. Maybe that's common sense, but we need to think about our portfolio diversification, the risk diversification of that, even the tax diversification of that, and make sure that we're building a plan that is going to suit the unique situation of our client. We need to make sure that we understand their goals, exactly what their personal circumstances are, and really need to build that custom plan, put together what we call our rooted roadmap to make sure that we're laying out a path that we can find our way down and we can revisit from time to time as we go throughout retirement.
I think I'm not alone when I say that I really like control, and it's hard to give up that control. So when we think about taxes and things that, again, we don't have any say over, how can that plan help us rein that back in and get a little bit of that control back that I love so much?
Well, you know what? I was thinking about this question a little bit as we were putting some of these talking points together, and stick with me here, but I'd like to correlate this to a hiking trail. So thinking through tax planning as this hiking adventure, some paths, they're easy, right? You know what's coming. It's just easy peasy and going to be no issue. Others, they can be a little bit more rocky and unpredictable. And so you have to also consider not only the type of trail or what's going to maybe come up, but you have to realize that maybe as you go throughout, or at least I'll speak for myself, as I go throughout an entire day of being out in nature, I'll tell you that I'm going to have my energy drop. I'm going to wane there, and it's going to become much more difficult for me throughout the rest of the day, throughout a weekend, whatever that case might be. The burden of taxes in retirement is a lot like that in an odd way. It's one of those things that if we're not planning for it, it can most definitely deplete our income sources at an unsustainable rate. And the longer that we go throughout retirement, and we started this show by talking about, hey, how long does retirement last? 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Mm-hmm. We have to be looking at the fact that, hey, that will also cause our investments to wane as well. I recently did a few hiking challenges, and I'm going to do one with Jenna, my wife, this summer. And we were planning for it a little bit the other day. And I tell you what, just the idea of having to put a game plan together and make sure that we're trying to lay out the best strategy possible for this endurance challenge is important. I think it's important to our marriage to make sure that we're not bickering at each other, but it's really important that we can make sure to hit the finish line together. Much like putting a plan together. Thinking about, where does your money sit? Is it taxable, tax deferred, tax free? What type of risk do you have? Making sure that you're emphasizing the fact of being proactive in this planning process. It's critically important, Kelly, and I think it's one thing that a lot of folks miss.
That's a big risk and undertaking, I would have to say, on this adventure. So I cannot wait to catch up with you after that happens. Now, want to learn how to manage your tax buckets? Call or text for a complimentary call with Zach's fiduciary advisor team to talk more about a tax strategy personalized for you. Now, it doesn't matter if you've saved $500,000, $2 million, or $10 million plus for retirement. Don't miss this opportunity. Remember, there is no cost or obligation. You can call 855-955-6868. So don't hesitate to dial now. Straight ahead, Zach shares his retirement checklist to help you prepare for life's changes. That's next in Digging Deep And still to come, Zach answers some of your most pressing retirement questions, rather. You're watching Rooted in Retirement. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You have a club for every scenario. A driver for the long holes. Wedges to get you over the hazards. And a putter for when you need a touch of finesse. What about your retirement? Will you have enough to play the back nine? Call to set your 15-minute phone visit today and let's find out. Get a second set of eyes on your retirement plan.
There are some things you can't avoid, but you can avoid overpaying taxes in retirement. You may think your taxes will go down in retirement, but that's not always true. In fact, sometimes your tax liability could go up. We're offering a free guide to show how you may be able to pay fewer taxes in retirement. Learn how different retirement accounts are taxed and options to help make your retirement income more tax efficient, all in easy to understand terms. Download this free tax guide now to help keep what's yours and avoid overpaying taxes in retirement.
In today's Digging Deep, as we talk about trying to prepare for life's curveballs, Zach shares what you might need on your retirement checklist. Zach?
Well, Kelly, the first thing that comes to mind is an income plan. You know, it's the first curveball that I can think of, and retirement without income, well, it's just not that great. We need to make sure that we're building a plan that's going to last 10, 20, 30, 40 years for retirement, and that, in my opinion, is very, very critical. As I think about that, number two is making sure that we're adjusting for inflation. We have all felt the pain of inflation over the last handful of years. There's no doubt that things are costing more, and that is putting retirees in a tighter position as they start to think about how long is their money going to last. It's very, very important that we're building that income plan, but once again, making sure to adjust for inflation, making sure we're going to have enough. Number three, as I think about making sure we have money that's going to last, I can't help but think of tax efficiency. We've got to be thinking long and hard about what are the ways that we can keep more of our money in our pocket and maybe not so much in Uncle Sam's. There's no doubt that this can help stretch money for a married couple, most definitely. We can lean into married filing joint rates, maybe before something tragic were to ever happen to one of those folks, where now all of a sudden we're talking a single taxpayer status. For those of you that are watching that aren't married, well, you already understand that, frankly, all of that weight is just on your shoulders. You need to make sure that you're being as efficient as you possibly can, and once again, making that money stretch as long as possible. Number four, investment strategy. We've talked about income. We've talked about making sure to adjust it over time. We've talked about the taxation of it. Well, how is the portfolio itself built? Making sure that we have some growth mindset, that we're growing things well, but also making sure that we're protecting from downside. Making sure that we're looking at fees. Making sure that it's a well-rounded approach is extremely, extremely important. So we have to take care of first things first. We need to make sure that this money is going to last as long as we do. Now, as I start to think about a few other components, I can't help but think of healthcare coverage. Well, healthcare is going to be really our number one expense in retirement, maybe only second to taxes, which I've already just spoke about. Thinking through healthcare is really, really important, and it can get very confusing. Thinking through Medicare, Medicare supplements, the different drug coverages, and so on. Yeah, it can be confusing, but it is critically important that you get those things correct. And that is one area that we've recently leaned into at Rooted Wealth Advisors. Now, as I think about healthcare, I can't help but think of long-term care planning. This is really one of the reasons I got involved in the business in the first place. My grandma Marilyn, she needed care for 18 years, and my grandfather had to pay that out of pocket. Obviously, that adjusted his retirement in a massive way, and there's no doubt that that care was very important to her. But once again, it would be great to make sure you have a long-term care plan in place. 18 years, that's just a long, long time. And of course, it was very destructive to the retirement picture. Lastly, I would like to think of legacy. And for legacy for us, it's not just leaving money behind. It's making sure you're leaving, kind of on your own terms, if you will. Making sure that you're living out those golden years. But yes, you need to make sure that you're sitting in a situation that, well, frankly, you are planning for that next generation. You're making sure that you have the T's crossed and I's dotted, because as we jokingly say, when it's too late, it's too late. And one thing that you can count on from me and my team is that we're committed to helping people just like you with your retirement planning, helping ensure that we are planning for every piece of that checklist to succeed. It's simple. Just call 855-955-6868. Again, that number is 855-955-6868.
Thank you, Zach. Have a question about retirement? Don't go anywhere. Zach has the answers coming up in our Q&A segment. Rooted in Retirement continues right after this.
Congratulations, you did it! You worked hard and saved for retirement, but now you have questions. Could my taxes increase? How will I cover my expenses? Will my income last? You need a strategy to help make sure your hard-earned money goes the distance in retirement. That's why we're offering this free guide designed to help you determine if your nest egg can withstand the challenges of a 21st century retirement. Longer lives, increasing healthcare costs, and taxes are just a few of the possible risks to your income. Get the guide today and take the first step to help your money last in retirement.
You probably have questions about retirement. I got a guy here ready to answer them. So, Zach, how about it?
Let's go.
Okay, this question is from Clark. Clark says, I'm 64 years old. My wife and I still have term life insurance. We're wondering if it would be best to find a different type of insurance that could take us into retirement. Could you give us your input?
Well, for Clark here, I have to think about my own situation. I have young kids. You have young children. And so as we think about this, our need today might be different than what it looks like at the age of 64, if I heard you correctly about Clark here. So, as we start to look at any insurance-based product, you have to think about what's the need. Auto insurance, you want to tailor it to the car that you're driving. You need to make sure you're tailoring life insurance, of course, to your own specific needs. So as I look at things now, things are very important over the next 20 years. Maybe having term insurance, in my scenario, it can make a lot of sense. By then, hopefully the kids are through college and maybe they're on their own feet. In Clark's situation, I'd like to know more. Is there any debts that we need to make sure to cover if something were to tragically happen? Is there any income that maybe he's still bringing to the table that we need to make sure that, hey, if we can't get that, this could really throw retirement out the window for a spouse possibly. Maybe there's even a different need, such as wanting to make sure to leave some assets behind. But if so, maybe it's not term insurance, maybe it's some permanent type contract. I guess what I want folks to hear is that we need to really be thinking about what do we have, making sure that it is tailored, and that is true of any income plan, any investment plan, and even any life insurance plan.
I got to tell you, what I was hearing is 20 years for the kid. Like, they're on their own. You've got this now. You're old enough. All right. Well, this next question is from Deb. And she asks, here is my husband. We have several emergency funds, bank accounts with more than enough money to cover 6 months of income in the event of an emergency. I'm curious about other options that would earn higher interest for us. Could you give me some examples, please?
Well, I tell you, as of recent, with interest rates being much higher, there are a lot better returns that might be out there simply by looking at simple things, CDs, money market accounts that might end up having a little bit better return than simply a checking or a savings account. So I think the first place to look is just to say, hey, what guarantees are sitting out there? There could be MIGA contracts, which would be more of an annuity basis, but returns have been fairly solid. I think we have to take a step back, though, here for Deb and say, okay, what do we need this money to do? If it's only rainy day emergency funds, maybe we should have some of those just simply sitting in a boring old bank account and just making sure that they're there if we ever need them. If these are funds that we say we might not really need for some time, maybe putting them in a more well-diversified portfolio could make a lot of sense. I just want everyone to understand that, yes, some guarantees are much higher, but we have to be thinking about what is the plan? What do we need these funds to do? And once again, how we build those accounts, it's critically important.
That customized plan for sure. Well, this question is from Joe. Joe asks, what might be the best investments for someone who is 61, healthy, and wanting to retire as soon as possible?
Well, I have to think about, it's just really back to, you mentioned the word custom. We have to make sure to look a little deeper here in terms of making sure we have a unique strategy in place. And so what I would say to Joe and to really anyone that's out there watching, I would make sure that we're taking a solid look at, well, if we want to retire, in 61's the example, do we have a pension? What do things look like at 62 for Social Security? Kelly, we could take it that early if we wanted to. So, hey, will that be enough? Because if not, maybe we need to build those investments a little differently versus someone that says, hey, I've got enough funds coming from these different income sources. I might not need to touch that money for some window of time. So I think customization, making sure to not take a cookie cutter approach, that is critically important. But if we are near retirement, and this goes for really most everyone watching, if you're near retirement, you have to get your arms around what type of risk do you have on your accounts. Once again, making sure that those dollars are teed up and ready to use for retirement, critically important. Stays away from things like sequence of return risk, which we've talked about on other shows, and very important to your financial health moving into retirement.
Well, William asks, I own several rental properties that I'm planning to use for retirement income. What are my options for a backup plan in case I decide not to be a landlord anymore?
It's interesting. I've heard this from many clients over the several decades that I've been in business now. It's just when we get to a certain point, the question becomes, can I be the handyman or handywoman that I once was? Do I want to take on all of this responsibility? And the answer is different for each one. There's some that absolutely love it. They see it as maybe a part-time occupation to keep them busy in their retirement years. There's others that want to step back. So of course we could be looking at things like getting a property manager. We've done that for a lot of our clients and been able to get them acquainted with a relationship that can kind of hand off some of those needs so they don't have to feel that burden. But we, of course, can make sure that we look at, okay, what if we were to sell those? What type of income are we getting from them? What type of income do we need to replace? Things can get pretty in-depth here, and I won't go super deep today, but Kelly, you can end up rolling funds. Maybe that's a 1031 exchange. Now, that would be to a different type of property. You can have certain types of accounts, like a special opportunity zone REIT, of which you could roll funds to and not have to assume all of those taxes right out of the gates, because that is critically important. It, of course, is a critical part in our process, and that rooted retirement process makes sure to pop the hood on not only income that we just discussed, the taxes of such a sale, making sure that we understand what we would do with those funds if we no longer had a rental property.
Great insights as always. We are lucky to have you. Thanks, Zach. Well, if you want to learn ways to generate lifetime income, potentially reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, reach out now. Zach and the team are ready to help you start building a retirement plan designed to help you flourish in retirement. It's as simple as calling or texting for your complimentary call with their team of fiduciary advisors. Here's the number, 855-955-6868. Again, that number is 855-955-6868. Don't hesitate to call now. For Zach and the team at Rooted Wealth Advisors, I'm Kelly Dame. We look forward to seeing you next time on Rooted in Retirement.